Good evening. I'd like to call to order the Wednesday, December 14th meeting of the Moscow Planning and Zoning Commission and begin with approval of the minutes of November 9th. We haven't met in a month. So, anybody have any additions, corrections, or deletions?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, minutes carried. All right, so correspondence. Mike, is there any correspondence from staff?
None from staff, no.
I received a couple of emails from our former mayor asking about queues for, and sort of a follow-up. I think I sent the first one to you, and then I got a second one in response. And when drive-up businesses have events and the line queues up onto 95 or some other location, what do we plan to do about it, or what can be done about it, or what as an issue? And I kind of looked at the situation that was pointed out, and I thought, well, gee, if we plan for the 100-year party, you could have a huge parking lot, but there's already a big parking lot there, so, that snakes around. So I didn't know quite how to respond. I think I forwarded it to you and sent that response, and then I got another response, and the dialogue continues, I guess. But if anybody has any ideas on, or has observed this circumstance of problems of overflow onto, clogging up traffic from drive-up businesses having a queue that is too long, I don't know if it's a widespread problem or not. I'm seeing somebody in the audience shaking their head. But, yes.
Was there a specific location that was mentioned, or?
Yes, Dutch Brothers.
I was going to say I've gotten caught in that. I've seen that, so that is an issue. Not all the time, but particularly if you're wanting to make a left turn on D into Rosars, that sometimes that turn lane, even not the turn lane, but it backs up in the left lane, and then you have trouble
across that intersection.
No, it doesn't. I haven't seen it go clear across the intersection.
What they did, your time you're talking about, they came out the alley and took up that whole alley, and then went around the Allstate building and took up all that parking, and then went all the way around the Allstate building back down the road and took all that parking up. So that's probably what they're talking about.
And they were all people sitting in their cars waiting to get waited.
All people sitting in their cars waiting to get a free coffee or whatever they're giving away that day. Yeah, you get stamps or something.
It's a buy one get one free coffee day.
Good gravy.
Actually, kind of weird. All the collegians at WSU that I work with at one chapter, they love coming up. People make the trip from Pullman to come to the Dutch Brothers here, and Dutch Brothers has tried to deal with it with
They have all those cones.
Yeah, cones, but then they're confined by their property. I just don't think they ever expected that many people in line.
Maybe they should have a sign that says, "You do not line up," or the city says, I've seen this for ferries and other events in other places, where there's queues. You may not line up here, period. Once you enter their property, anything spill. Would that solve the problem without having to do some kind of?
I don't know, but they went through the city because my truck was parked there, and they told me to move it.
Yeah, the whole intent, mainly on the highway is not that is so we don't have traffic backing up and clogging the highway system. Right. So, what they've started to do is the city's required through the engineering department like a traffic control plan. And so they have to have like a professional company submit the traffic control plan, and then engineering reviews it and approves it. And then there's a bunch of check-offs. So you have like streets department, police department, engineering department, public works, all these departments have to review it and sign off so they know what's going on. And it's usually when they have a special event is when it occurs. And that was, so they've been trying to figure out a way to efficiently handle it without, that much backing up. I think the last one they're referring to is they had stripped some parking temporarily just off of Jackson and D Street, and they were using that as a dedicated lane so people could continue and then make the right turn by Rosars and then head straight through on D towards the main intersection. So they were directing people in those parallel parking spaces. They loop around on D, and then they go into the alley and then loop around into their, business. And, we had, for quite a while, we've planned on, our parking standards currently don't address queuing of drive-throughs. And so we've always planned on trying to incorporate that at one point in time. But, looking at what maybe other jurisdictions do, thinking about the number of queuing vehicles, we were at the time thinking maybe 4 or 5 maximum.
Right. No, it's
and so
I finally saw it.
in every in every other coffee stand you look at, there's a maximum of probably only 4 or 5 cars, and maybe there's a window on either side,
right.
so they have maybe 3, 4 on each side that are waiting,
Right.
and it handles it pretty efficiently. But it's just more of a result of a popularity of a certain brand.
So maybe to me it seems like a sign on the highway that says no stopping on highway. Period. So they have to go figure it
They were
out.
trying to come in the highway
Yeah.
as well as that alley, but the alley seemed to work. It seemed to keep them off the
Yeah,
highway.
I saw them queued on the highway
And so
when
they
I
might have
came
been
down
coming
D
in
Street
both
one
ways
time.
or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Going
Yeah.
southbound on 95?
I was coming down D
Okay.
and going to Rose Hours actually, and I could see the lineup. Several cars back on 95 going south.
Okay.
It was
'Cause I've
safe.
gotten
People-
stuck in
So
the down.
Catherine, yeah.
Well, I feel like Dutch Brothers is working really hard to handle it. But to me, the problem that I've seen in all the times, because I actually use that way a lot. I mean, I drive that way often, going down D to turn left, so I see it. And there's a lot of traffic that turns left against the double yellow line. So if everybody came into the queue the way they were supposed to come, which is they would be going south on 95, and then they would turn right into Dutch Brothers, the amount of time it takes to do that would allow people to move through the queue. So if you were coming north on 95 and had to eventually get going south, the queue would move, but people are crossing the double yellow.
Doing a U-turn on it?
North.
No, they're just not Ewing, they're just turning.
turning left.
Oh,
I'm
gotcha.
pretty
So
yeah.
the pilot
Yep.
is
Yeah.
pulling it up.
So it's
pretty
more of
sh-
an enforcement issue. It sounds
Well, I'm
like.
pretty sure last time they had a sign that said no left turn right there, and that's why everybody was heading and taking the left turn lane onto D Street. Because I was there that same day, and yeah, it was long. I had to probably wait through, it was probably maybe only 2 lights. So it was a little bit of a delay. But that's part of these traffic control plans is signage. And so, they're required, they've got the sign company that rents all this stuff. And so part of that is, putting that signage in appropriate locations so you don't have the backing in the
So
right
we-
way.
We have one question from the public back there, or would you?
I have been stuck
Oh,
going south on 95 multiple times for people that are parked on 95
right. That's what I
in
saw.
the south lane.
Yeah.
And it was just on a game day or some
Yeah.
Saturday morning or something. It wasn't an event day. It's just people decided, I'm going to make the right into
Dutch Brothers. Yeah.
Dutch Brothers. And they're parked.
Yeah.
And it's like,
Could
And
you
then-
state your
and-
name also, please?
it's Kelly Moore.
Kelly. Thank you, Kelly.
Oftentimes, when there's a lot of people, talking about a simple, solution to the enforcement issue, for those double yellows, they'll put those pylon things. that you
Flimsy
can-
ones or whatever.
Yeah, just to keep, first as a reminder that you can't make that left turn. But then what you have to then deal with, like what Mike's talking about, then you've got to deal with where that traffic's going to go to turn around to come south. Because you don't want to take away from their business. We're thrilled that they're going there, but then how do you get those people turned around to get into the business? So I think, do we call them and then you say, hey, hire somebody? What's the next step?
Well, it's, the part of the complication is it's a state highway, so Idaho Transportation
That's a whole
Department
nother-
dictates everything that happens there, and so we can control what happens on D and Jackson. That's why we had removed parking for the day in order for the event. But as far as ITD, we'd have to route everything through them to do anything permanent on there. So that would be the
Well,
challenge.
that D and alley, that Jackson, that seemed to work.
Seemed like I thought it worked all right for the number of
Yeah.
cars. I mean, there must have been 40, 50 cars that were backed up for
Yeah, at times I bet.
yeah.
It's just
That kept
really
them
good
off
coffee,
of
is that the
I,
deal? or-
I mean, you must spend the amount in gas that you'd save for the coffee, I would imagine. Yeah, I don't know.
There's a
It was just-
demographic, I think, that goes there more than other places.
Yeah.
When we were coming back from the airport last night, and I asked the question, is there anything open 24 hours in Moscow anymore? And that is, yeah, that's one place it is. I don't,
24 hours.
they're open 24
They are
hours.
now,
Yeah,
They
yeah.
didn't start out that way, but they are now.
Yeah. So, anyway, okay, so I guess it sounds like what you're saying, Mike, is that there's really nothing we can do about it. It's already a process that they have to apply for a traffic flow permit, and it's kind of, so that's.
Yeah, any of these
yeah.
special events, they have to go through that
Yeah.
pretty lengthy process, approval process of hiring the traffic control company and renting all the equipment.
And
having
if
them
it's
come
not
out.
a special event and just people like their
yeah,
coffee, then
yeah.
there's not a lot.
Well, if you look at the site, anything that we're likely to come up with for queuing standards, they're most likely going to exceed. There's
Right.
how it kind of serpentines around there. There's
They'll have nine.
queuing enough for 9-10 cars, and so
Yeah, they got a lot.
we
They got a
we
snake now that goes.
yeah we would look at maybe a standard of 5 cars maximum
Right,
is
right.
what we would look at probably. So I think that they would probably meet that standard. But.
Okay, well, it sounds like more of an enforcement issue then, keeping people from turning left over double yellows, et cetera.
Well, it's the same way, because when people come out of the gas station, they also turn.
Try to get in.
Left to go south, so they're crossing the double yellow to go south.
I do
They
that.
come out of the gas station, so
I
they cross
do
over the north.
You're supposed to go back
I do that.
out. They don't make it easy.
Well, either or. If you're going out on D, you're crossing a yellow too
Yeah,
to
yeah,
get into the
there's no
turn
break
lane.
in.
So you're either hanging a right
Yeah,
in
you
either
are.
location. So
But you're not crossing the highway.
Oh, boy. Okay. So, I guess that's it for correspondence. Transportation Commission meeting report.
The Transportation Commission met a week ago yesterday. Main topic of discussion was the Complete Streets policy. We are working on a draft. We made a number of changes in the draft. So the current draft was not one I could bring to distribute to you guys. When we get a more complete draft at our next meeting, I will bring the copy to you. The other topic of discussion was beginning of discussion of streetlights. The topic arises because Avista is in the process of beginning to make some changeovers to LED lights and full cutoff. So basically, it's that is happening, and there's some discussion going on that people are surprised at how bright it is.
Honestly, at my house, they put LED lights in there, and I pulled up to my stop sign, and it scared me to death. I thought I was getting hit by a car. Because it had been out so long, they fixed it, they put LEDs in it, I guess, and man, I looked right and I thought I was gone.
Well, my Spruce Circle light has been intermittent and now out for a long time, and nobody's complaining.
Well, I wasn't
But I
complaining
suspect they're
either.
probably going to come back there and upgrade it to an LED, which is going to shine right directly on my through my bedroom window. But it is an ongoing process. Be aware that it's happening. We did discuss a bit the city policy as to exactly where lights are placed, basically at intersections. There's, in most cases, not lights between intersections, even though occasionally that's a long distance. And the next transportation meeting will be the second Tuesday in January.
Okay,
So can I
so,
answer your light thing? So we live on a corner, so we had one of the lights, and so I called Avista this is years ago, about the splash. It was a really wide splash of light, and they came in. You know, they started putting those cones on it, and the LEDs. Dwight was talking about this at the commission meeting I was at last night for Moscow Pathways, about how they're controlling the nighttime lights. You know, they're trying to have less light go into the atmosphere, and they're like come down.
Dark sky kind of ordinance.
Yeah, the dark sky.
We do have a dark sky ordinance, which we passed many years ago.
Well, these are definitely compliant with that.
Yeah.
But then I did learn at the time when I was doing all this that Avista had originally done lights every 600 feet.
Yeah.
That seems to be their
Yeah.
metric. But I don't know what else they do to do it.
Yeah. But it is possible in some cases where the light is objectionable, even though it is full cutoff, to shade them a little bit. Les was complaining Les was complaining that the light behind his place is elevated quite a bit and is bothering him.
Yeah.
It's extremely bright.
Yeah.
Yeah, that can be good.
Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you for that update. Okay, the next item on the agenda is open microphone. It's an opportunity for members of the public to speak to the commission regarding matters not on our agenda tonight, nor currently pending before planning and zoning. Yes, would you like to come talk?
I would.
Yes, okay.
Good.
Please state your name and address for the record.
Come on up to the table.
Yeah, come up to the table, yeah.
My name is Kelly Moore. It's 1025 South Logan, and I would just really like to commend this committee and the Planning and Zoning, the whole Community Development Department on how well they have progressed in the years that I have been dealing with them. I used to be a builder in town and a developer, and it has always been straightforward to work with the city of Moscow, and what everybody slogging through all the details, that it's not a glamorous type of effort that you do to deal with the code as it is and to bring it up to date, because a lot of the language doesn't count anymore, and to make it fit with our new society as it is, with the advent of LED streetlights. I mean, the one that's in front of our house, it's better lighting than we have in here tonight. I can tell you, you can read outside with the streetlights. So it's one of those things that it's really nice to have you dedicated to doing what you're doing. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for sharing that with us. Appreciate it. And I guess there's no one else out there in the public who wants to come and give us a compliment tonight. No, thank you very much. Okay, next item on the agenda is use table discussion by Mike.
Well, I recall I think it's been a couple months since we last talked about it. I don't have any new information. I think at the time I'd given you some homework to go through and look at the various uses and whether, where they're allowed and where they aren't, whether it's principal permitted or conditional use or accessory use. And, we can cover whatever you want to cover, but I thought that, this is your time to go through and ask any questions that you might have on any of the uses that are in there before we, I think the next step would be moving forward and putting it in legislative format and seeing what it looks like, how it fits. And so this isn't, by any means the last crack at it. It will go through another month and a half, 2 months of taking a look at it. But is there anything that, as you worked your way through it, that jumped out at you or couldn't follow? Or
I think it's really a good effort, and I appreciate it. I think my question is more a formatting issue, and I don't know if it's because I'm looking at it on the iPad, but one of the things that I thought would be helpful is to continue at each page the legend, so that you can go back. So, for example, at the top of the first one, where you've got every zone defined, if you could do that at the top of each page, I think would really be helpful to as you're going through it. Again, I didn't know if it was a formatting issue for the way I was looking at it, but I like the way it's laid out, the concept. So really good.
Yeah, no,
Likewise, I'm very impressed. One thing that jumped out at me was a trivial one about the sixth line, agriculture and so on. Over on the right side, under recommendations, agriculture's in there twice.
true.
Trivial.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I see that. Well, I looked at it, tried to somewhat arbitrarily to see, because working in with other building codes in other jurisdictions, trying to figure out what's allowable for a particular project, just to see if this would be easy to use. And I think it's great. I think you don't have to thumb back and forth. And I have worked in a few places where the use tables were more common, and I always liked them. And this is a really well put together one, I think.
Yeah, it's really
So,
easy. Really
yeah.
easy to use.
So.
Yeah, everything is just right there. But
Yep, and it's all in one glance.
Yeah.
You don't have to.
It's a lot
Dig
of
down.
information to try and make be uncomplicated.
Yeah, and taking the language out of it and just having the graphic is makes it a lot simpler. So I think we're all liking it. So
Okay,
I
you
want
guys are going to make it easy on me.
Yeah, I guess so. And Nels isn't here, so we'll have to. Okay.
In terms of accessory dwelling units, I did note that it changed from singular on the left to plural on the right. What do we allow in terms of multiple accessory dwelling units?
Well, we would only allow one.
Because it's become plural, and that's confusing me.
Oh, the recommendations?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, this is kind of the more finalized, the one in the blue here. So
Yeah.
it would just be singular. So it'd just be accessory dwelling unit. You're limited to one only if you have a single family dwelling and it
Right.
meets the minimum lot area. So we wouldn't allow multiple ones. So we'll make sure that is singular.
Okay.
Other comments? Anyone? So.
Any comments on? I guess I was having a little bit of difficulty following some of the things you're consolidating together, and maybe you can comment on logic for.
Okay.
On what?
Yeah, the things that are being consolidated.
Oh, right. Yeah.
I'm trying to figure out whether there's anything in there that I'm not anticipating.
Oh, where, I've got you. We're eliminating certain restrictions and putting them elsewhere. Well, for example, like fire training facilities.
Yeah.
I mean, I kind of
Well, I guess
read
that
the logic,
that made
and
sense.
it all sort of made sense, at least.
I think it made sense. Combined with, eliminate combined with, encountered several.
I did wonder about chemical, now I can't see it, but chemical plants that are getting sort of stacked up with everything else. I'm thinking, that could be a little more hazardous than general heavy manufacturing, but maybe that's where did I see that?
It's over in the commercial inventory,
Oh, okay.
chemical plant.
No.
I'm in the written order, yeah. Yeah. All right. And I don't know, I mean, a lot of codes sort of separate that one out just because it's got its own special problems, so I don't know.
Well, if it's C,
Yeah,
does that make any difference? Maybe that,
right, probably not.
Well, yeah, and right now, that's what we have listed as a special use permit under industrial zone.
Okay,
And so what we'd be proposing to do is eliminate it because it would be encompassed under heavy manufacturing. So, you know, a lot of these really specific
right,
uses like that would be combined underneath this broader term and,
Right.
you know, heavy manufacturing. We don't have very much industrial left. We're hoping to the southeast Moscow Industrial, you know, we had a master plan developed down there by Fountains Industrial Park, and we're hoping to, you know, that would move forward in the next couple of years and we could get some more industrial designations since we've been shifting it out of downtown with Legacy Crossing and then, you know, up by Dumas. There was other St. John Hardware. There's other pockets of industrial that, you know, it's always been a goal to shift that to, you know, a location with access to the highway system, but kind of on the outskirts of town. So,
Was an environmental impact assessment ever done with the fact that it's so close to the creek? That whole area around Fountains? Or was that ever even, I never thought about it, but if there were chemicals and...
yeah, they would have to do some, I think they had done some preliminary testing. TerraGraphics was working on that project, and part of that was doing some channel modification to trying to get the floodplain reworked in that area.
And that would
but
protect
yeah,
it?
it usually, sorry?
And that would be a protection then for any spills into...
We would just have to go through our standard stormwater, and, you know, covered by Department of Environmental Quality, and EPA would cover all that to
Okay.
make sure that it doesn't get into our storm system.
Okay.
There could be some remnant contamination, like on the runway area,
Yeah.
just from the 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 spray
Yeah.
from the crop dusters, and so, you know, it's likely that there probably would be some remediation done out there.
okay. Any other comments on the use table?
It's easy to use.
Yeah,
Yeah, that was the goal.
yeah, I like it a lot.
Well, so I can take this and we'll work with legal to try to get it formatted to what it's going to look like in the zoning code and legislative format, and then we can bring it back maybe next time and take another
Great.
look at it and keep it going.
Good work. Okay, street tree program update.
Well, as you recall, we've been working on this earlier this year, and this was for street trees planted with new subdivisions typically. We'd gone through kind of the background. Program was initiated in 2001, around that time frame, and what it required was any new subdivision that comes in, the developer is required to pay into a street tree fund $100 per tree. Parks and Rec Department calculates the number of street trees just depending upon the number of lots within each subdivision, and so we were coming out after about, started I guess in '99. After about 15 years in the program, we were getting about 61% planning rates because it was largely voluntary, and so the developer would submit the money, and then whoever was building the house, the owner ended up getting a rebate or a voucher where they could go to a nursery and then plant the trees. We had a I don't know if there's a little bit of a disconnect. We'd send out flyers and a kind of a new home packet to everybody that constructed a house that would give them where to contact and the rebate information to go and plant the tree. Still had some pretty poor luck, and it hovered around that 61%. Some of the subdivisions were better than others, but the cumulative was around 61% utilization. So we had areas and subdivisions that didn't have a whole lot of street trees getting planted, and then we had this accumulation of funds that Parks and Rec and the Tree Commission are currently trying to decide what to do with. It'd be more of hiring a summer intern to go around and plant all these trees after this accumulation of money in the street tree fund. And so we had discussed with the Tree Commission and Planning and Zoning Commission about how we get more trees planted. There was a couple of options. The first one was requiring the subdivision developer to plant the trees at the beginning of the process. So when the roads and the sidewalks and the curbs and everything goes in, to plant the trees at that time. One advantage would be that they would have some growth to them. They'd get planted early, and then by the time you have the build out of the subdivision, maybe they have 5-6 years on them. One of the challenges with that is whenever you come in, the driveway is dependent upon the house design. So, high likelihood that you would have to dig that up, relocate it, just based upon the design of the house that the homeowner chose to build on that particular lot. We already have a bit of an issue with sidewalks because, maybe it's a rolled curb. In order to we require reinforcement of the sidewalk, so it has to be, instead of 4 inches thick, it has to be 6 inches thick to accommodate a vehicle going over it. And so, anytime a contractor builds a house in a new subdivision, they're automatically required to dig up that portion of sidewalk. Usually they have to get heavy equipment in there to build the house anyway, so it's usually damaged, but they would have to re-pour it. And so, I think Public Works is looking at maybe having them put up a bond and then construct sidewalks as they go along in order to be a little bit more efficient about that. And so that was kind of one of the issues with option number one. We had explored option number two, which is to require the planting of the trees prior to the certificate of occupancy. And so it was either going to be the contractor or the homeowner responsible for that. We had gone through those, and the commission, I think, was leaning towards option number two. We had chosen to put together before I get to that, right now the program's really just targeted towards single-family development. So we had some questions about, what do we do with commercial, multifamily, residential? Should street trees be required with redevelopment? So if you tear down a house that maybe 100 years old and you rebuild, should you be responsible for planting street trees if you don't have them in front of that lot? And so those were a couple of questions that we had grappled with. We decided to put together this street tree advisory committee to discuss this with some members of the public that deal with subdivisions. We had a developer of a subdivision in there, contractor, builds homes in the area, land use attorney, one member of the public, a couple P&Z commission members, and then some tree commission members on there as well. We worked through this committee. We had about 2-3 meetings, met at lunchtime over last winter. Really recommended option number two, similar to Planning and Zoning Commission, that they be planted prior to certificate of occupancy. The contractor expressed some concern with the recent trend of, so if you're moving towards completion of the home and you have things that are minor, we can give you what's called a temporary certificate of occupancy, and that lets whoever the homeowner is to move into the residence while they work on these few minor things before we give you the permanent certificate of occupancy. And so if they're up against a time crunch, the family needs to move in by a certain period of time, we'll usually allow them to occupy it with a temporary certificate of occupancy. I guess these have recently become an issue in the past year or two with banks not releasing the loans if they have a temporary certificate of occupancy, and so it's really become an issue with them and they used to not have any issues with temporary certificate of occupancies, and the contractors were happy with that, and just gave them maybe another couple of weeks to get it done. Well, that's starting to become an issue, and so the contractor raised the issue of, well, if it's in the middle of the winter and I'm trying to get a certificate of occupancy, and well, maybe the city will work with me and give me a temporary one for 4 or 5 months until it turns to be spring and the ground's not frozen anymore and I can get the trees planted. That is no longer really an option for him anymore if the bank's going to hold him up. So what he was looking for was some type of security deposit, much like public improvements. You post a security, and then you complete that improvement, then you get the security back. It's Public Works does these all the time, mainly for curbs, sidewalks, streets, things of that nature. And so that's what he would like, the option of having that security deposit. It'd be a little bit more work on our end, but it really wouldn't be that big of a deal. And so that was kind of their last recommendation, was to provide the option of, if they can't get the trees planted, to get a full certificate of occupancy, just post a security, and then once they get the trees planted, then they recoup that security. It's refunded back to them. So that was what they ended up going with for the recommendation. I had been working with David Schott, who's our Assistant Parks and Rec Director, on the resolution and ordinance. We had reported the Council Administrative Committee just to make sure that the council was on board and liked the direction that we were going with the program. And so we would revise the current resolution. We were reviewing where to insert it in the city code. And, Planning and Zoning Commission was working on it mainly just because we deal with subdivisions, and it's likely that we're looking at maybe inserting in the subdivision code a reference to street trees required. And so that's why the commission was kind of working back and forth between the tree commission on this one. We really decided that obviously within the community forestry section of the city code is where the main portion of this should be located. And so, what we had done was, with the ordinance, just created a new section, and I have that in a slide or two after this, but be really creating a new section for street trees required, and then going through kind of the program and all the requirements. We looked at the subdivision code, and we thought it pretty much covered it, sufficiently, just because we have it's already referenced in the standard construction drawings, and that's already referenced within the subdivision code. So the standard construction drawings are pretty much our street standards. So anytime you go through a new subdivision, maybe there's a collector or a local neighborhood street in there. Well, the developer has to build to that street standard, and then with all of our street standards, we have the street trees required, and then we show the tree line, which oftentimes for new developments is 10 feet wide in order to accommodate trees. And then we have that recitation saying that street trees are required. So we thought we were covered with the subdivision code, and what that would mean was we wouldn't need to conduct a public hearing at Planning and Zoning Commission level. It would be mainly the Tree Commission and Parks and Rec that would be carrying the majority of this forward. But I just wanted to come and kind of close the loop and share with you what we had come up with for inserting this into the community forestry section. And I think there's a little bit of overlap here when we're working on parking lot standards and kind of the landscaping and listing all the reasons why we do landscaping and put trees in parking lots. And there is quite a bit of overlap between the street trees and parking lot trees. And so I thought we had ended up beefing kind of the purpose section up and really inserting a lot of things that trees provide the city. And so I'd gone through discussing that it's Tree City USA, which was first designated in 1994, a little bit about the Tree Commission, what the intention of installing street trees, long-term benefits to the community, producing oxygen, cleaning pollutants from the air, filtering stormwater runoff, stabilizing soil with help with erosion, flood control, reducing noise levels and glare, providing shade, which reduces cooling costs in the summer. And then we had some stuff from the comp plan. So presence of street trees increases residential property values and encourages shopper to linger in commercial districts. So we have that in the comp plan. As we were going through that, is looking at the update for the comp plan. I come across a few of these. Street trees create a buffer between the street and sidewalk, which creates a safer walking environment for pedestrians and also creates a sense of place, which adds significantly to the aesthetics of the community. Then we go into when the applicability. So when are street trees required? Obviously, prior to the issuance of a building permit for a new principal structure or substantial improvement to any principal structure. And so this would kick in, your commercial, your multifamily, your single family, your two family, in order for Parks and Rec to take a look at street trees and whether or not they currently have any, maybe it's an existing lot. And this would cover all the lots and new subdivisions. You pull a new building permit for a principal structure. It's usually a single-family dwelling, and that would be the point where it kicks in. And then we have some cross-references to the resolution that we'll need to modify and those standard construction specifications and drawings, the street standards that we just covered. So. And then we go in to end it with the requirement should not apply to those subdivisions that contributed to the street tree fund prior to the effective date of this section. So we wanted to make sure that those subdivisions that had already contributed the money were, I guess, grandfathered in, for lack of a better term. Number of trees required, so we're not really changing that at all in the current resolution. It all depends on whether or not you're on a corner lot, internal lot, a flagpole lot, a cul-de-sac lot. It usually just determines on the lengths of frontage and the type of lot. And so there's really not a whole lot of changes, just some references as to where that's determined in the resolution. The installation process, so typically right now you need a permit to plant from the community forest administrator. And so we'll try to streamline this as much as possible. So when you come to get a building permit for a new principal dwelling, we can give you the information in order to start filling out and trying to identify your street trees that you're going to be required to install. We break out single-family and two-family dwellings. So we say that prior to the issuance of a building permit for any single-family, two-family dwelling, or any substantial improvement to a single-family or two-family dwelling, the applicant shall either, and we wanted to give them some options. So 3 options: they can just install the required street trees. So in the process of building the house, they can just install them, get their certificate of occupancy and be on their way. They can enter into an agreement which requires the installation of the required street trees prior to the issuance of the CO for the structure. So if they don't want to install them right away, they don't want to pay a security deposit in order to install them 6 months from now, they have the option of just installing them prior to the certificate of occupancy and just entering into an agreement saying they'll install them. Or they have an option of putting up that financial security in a form acceptable to the city, and then they can put up the security and pretty much install them, give them 6 months to a year. I think after, at the very end, after 24 months, the city has enough security that they can take that money and hire somebody to install ones that haven't been installed. And so that's really the intent of the security. And then for multifamily and commercial structures, usually with those type of developments, they're usually larger and they have landscape requirements because they usually have parking lots or maybe landscape buffers between other residential uses. So they're required to submit landscape plans. For multifamily and commercial, we thought that just requiring those as part of the landscape plan would probably be the best way to handle it. And so there wouldn't be a security option. It would just be that prior to certificate of occupancy for those multifamily and commercial, they would just be required to install the required street trees as part of their landscape plans. And so that's how we propose to handle the multifamily and commercial. And then at the very end, we just discuss a little bit more about the financial security. And so it's established in the fee resolution, and so the Parks and Rec Department will have to insert a line as to the cost of the tree as well as the labor to install it. I think they had ended up somewhere around $250 per tree, and that's the cost of the tree plus hiring somebody to go out there and put it in the ground if they choose not to install it. Then we discussed the releasing of the security, so the whole entire security will be released once the property owner calls and there's inspection from the forestry administrator. And then at the very end, like I mentioned before, if they're not installed within 24 months of the date of certificate of occupancy, the city may utilize the security to pay the cost of installing the street trees. And so, that's kind of the working draft right now as far as what Parks and Rec is, looking at moving forward with, and they've revised the resolution to reflect this. And so this is more of just letting you know, we've got a legal review. Tree Commission is likely to review it on January 5th and to put forward a recommendation. Then from there we go to administrative committee and then a public hearing before city council. And so just wanted to make sure the commission was up to speed on that, and if you saw it on the council agenda or admin committee agenda that you didn't think that we skipped you for some reason.
So all of that older funding that's still sitting, it's still there, and what's the plan for that? Will you try to find some sort of an intern or someone that go to those neighborhoods and use that money to put trees in?
Yeah, I think that right now I think they've been trying to send out information and more flyers about the availability of the vouchers to see if there's just maybe some people that didn't hear about it, and so try to get as many homeowners getting the vouchers out of the program as possible. Once they do that outreach and get a certain number of trees planted, and it looks like no other homeowners are coming in to utilize the vouchers, that's what it's looking like, is they'll probably just hire a couple seasonal interns. They always have a whole lot of seasonal interns taking care of the parks in the summertime. So I think this last year they were looking at budgeting for a couple of interns that would go around and have all the designated locations mapped out and planting the trees where they're currently not. So.
I know before when we talked about this, we talked about the irrigation of the plants. So the money gets spent, the trees are put in, and nobody bothers to water them. Do we have is there anything else there for maintenance of them?
Well, under our current community forestry ordinance, the adjacent property owners are responsible for maintaining those, and so they have a Tree Works database that they've put together in GIS at the Parks and Rec level, and so they're currently trying to get up to speed with tracking all the trees in the subdivisions and identifying ones that are dying and contacting the owners to replace those. Okay. And so that's why they come back 6 months later and do another follow-up inspection just to make sure the tree's doing well and is surviving. Is there an
educational component? So if an intern, say several $100s, is not used for one of those older additions and an intern ends up planting it, is there some kind of contact with the homeowner to educate them about, if you don't take care of it and it dies, now it becomes your responsibility to pay for a replacement? Is there some component like that? I guess I think about the trees. Like I see all these nice, healthy young trees get planted, and then they go, and I don't know, that really rubs me the wrong way.
Especially if they're being planted in the summer.
Yeah. Right.
They really need to be irrigated.
Yeah. It's almost like, well, why bother to have planted them if no one's going to take care of them?
Yeah, and I don't know the answer to that. I'm sure that the Tree Commission is thinking about those things when before they hire interns to go out and plant them, how they're going to make sure that they're maintained, and I'm sure that part of that would be an educational, outreach to the homeowner. A lot of these areas where they didn't get planted were high rental areas. So you have property owners that own the property and then maybe rent it to some college students that don't take care of the lawn, much less the trees. So they'll have to develop some type of strategy. Maybe it's going around and watering them with a city truck, and then just to get them established and get them going.
First year or two.
Yeah. So I'm sure that I can certainly pass that on to them, but I'm sure they're thinking about it. So.
They probably have.
Well, I was just going to say, so in Troy, when we lived in Troy for 14 years, and we got the land through the town there for the pathway, and then PCI came down and did some volunteer work and planted, and I lived on the other side of the grain elevators, so it gets really hot over there. So it was that time of year when they'd done all this amazing work, on the creek bed and everything. And so I saw the trees were dying, so I started watering them. And then we got the city truck, one of the city trucks, to park there, with requests from the city council. And then we parked one of the water trucks, and we filled up so people would go down in the neighborhood and help water the trees.
That's nice.
Yeah, so it was a community, that for people that lived around there. So, that kind of stuff works when people know that there's water available. Usually, especially like when you're talking those high rental areas they don't have hoses and they don't have the access, but if you just provide those big 5-gallon buckets that you know what I'm talking about, fill them up and then you just go dump it on there. And so anyway, we did that. So we saved some, which is good. And then the other thing I wanted to ask you about was in the rationale you have and the purpose. It's really, really cool, all the stuff that you're talking about. But all these trees also become a nature corridor. And so I thought that would be something to consider putting in there because, you have the songbird population and you have all the other animals that use the trees, to move throughout the area. And so I just thought that that's also something that people want the wildlife in their neighborhoods. And that could be part of that thing too, because sometimes that makes people think about it in different ways.
Okay.
Yeah.
The irrigation thing bothers me a lot too, and I'm wondering if in the street standards, and I confess to kind of ignorance with this, but would it be possible to insert something that requires a developer to at least put the basic infrastructure in? Might not have to install a system, but for example, you run the piping, the flexible piping under the sidewalk so that at least it is out in that area that could be connected to a homeowner's system. But it would seem to me like ultimately we're going to have to deal with the infrastructure of the irrigation systems as a part of the development. And I didn't know if that's something that had ever been considered, if it's even something that should be part of our purview. But it's really hard to get any irrigation out if you don't have something under the sidewalk already. And since all of this are in these areas that are outside the sidewalk, it seems like maybe it should be something considered anyway.
Okay. Yeah, I think it's more probably of a public works nature with the street standards. Looking at, and that was kind of went along with option number one, was looking at when the developer puts everything in, usually there's not water to the property until you build a house on it. Right. So, it'd be that developer trying to keep the tree alive in the, say they went through and planted all the trees, and then, since there's no water, well, there's water stub to it, but it's not, running through the meter in the house, right, and then coming out to the lines. That was part of the issue that they were running into, was just the lack of availability of water and the developer being able to take care of those in that time. But I know, I guess we would. I could talk to Public Works about that. And see.
I'd be, because you don't have to know exactly where the tree is going to go. You just have to know that you've got access to the if you're going to put a drip system in, all you have to do is start connecting it in. But if you don't have something running, it's really hard to get it onto the sidewalk afterwards.
Yeah.
So,
Could ask Kelly. He's dealt with all of that before.
It seems to me that contractors should be responsible for all those trees, and that would save a lot of headache, just listening to everything here. I mean, when they go to build the sidewalk or the driveway, I mean, it's warm weather, isn't it, when they're doing that, when they know where the driveway's going. If they could just plant those trees at the same time they do that driveway, in layman's terms, it just seems like it would save a lot of effort on everybody's part.
Yeah.
And make them responsible for it, or I don't know, for the first year or whatever. But
And that's what we're proposing, is to have them ultimately responsible. It's just to give them some options as to, there's certain times where they can, the dead of winter, and the ground's frozen, and
well, again, though, when they do that driveway, it's not going to be the dead of winter.
Sometimes it's pretty cold weather.
They do it like in freezing weather and pour concrete. And
If
all
they
that.
heat it up, they'll have to get out there with a blowtorch and everything and heat it up, but they can, yeah. Usually the asphalt plants are shut down, but the concrete is,
Well, that's
they're
what I
still
was
able
wondering
to
on
do
the
it.
asphalt plants. But
If you pour cement,
just pour concrete at the new diner.
I actually seen
yeah,
that.
if you pour concrete and put a blanket over it, can be
They
pretty
had
cold
they had the
out.
torch out there.
Yeah,
I drove
the torch
past
out
where
there,
they were out there. So
I did drive by that. Well, yeah, then you're back to ground zero then.
It just makes sense to me, though, that there's no point in repeating the same process over and over again. That there's the first occasion of planting a tree, then there should be some kind of mechanism, a commitment to it, that if it was worth putting it in the ground now, then it is worth taking care of it, instead of waiting 3 or 4 years and saying, well, now it's dead, let's go back and dig it up and start all over. So there's a lack of logic there to me.
Yeah, and part of this tree work system was in order to better track and identify trees.
That's
that
pretty
are,
cool that
so,
they have that.
Yeah, and so, part of this, when they submit the permit to plant, David would go in and insert or input the species and the location, and so he'd have that in the system, and then he could go back and verify if, a lot of times somebody would say that, well, there's never a tree there, maybe it dies and they remove it, and it's hard to keep track of whether or not they ever planted one, and
Never had an
things of that
inventory
nature.
of it.
So this, the system they developed is going to be pretty resourceful.
That's cool.
Well,
We're gonna track
certainly
those.
in the more established parts of town, when you have a tree that looks like it's dying, you get a notice. I mean, we had it with a big Dutch elm, and it was July, and it looked great, and then a week later, stuff started to die, and we had to have that thing out of there, like in a couple weeks, and we had to have something else back. Why aren't the same standards applied to new subdivisions? They should be.
Yeah.
If their tree dies, they replace it,
Yeah.
and they get on it. So then they are more motivated
Yeah.
to.
And they are,
So
yeah.
And the truth is, it just makes a community so much nicer.
Yeah.
If we tried to envision Moscow with no street trees,
Right.
it'd be really ugly.
But my point is that there's eyes on the street trees, so to speak,
Right.
in the established neighborhoods. So there should be eyes on the street in the new neighborhoods too.
Sure.
I mean, and in terms of that. So, but it seems like, having the flexibility of those couple different options depending on the time of year and the circumstances makes sense to me personally, even though it may be more complicated.
Yeah.
Even if the contractor can't plant, I agree with Rob, there's no reason you can't run a water line to the
Yeah.
curb strip.
Yeah, right.
And somebody, as long as it's located, then you can go from there. Yes, then you
Right.
can go from there with irrigation once the trees are in place.
Right. Okay, have we exhausted the trees? All right, 2009 comp plan update.
So as you all know, we have our comp plans from 2009. It was new. We adopted a new comp plan back then, and we have yet to update it. So, in the document, it says that, the intention is to be a living, dynamic document, and that it needs to be reviewed approximately every 5 years with the most up-to-date information. So, I think it matters less in a community like Moscow that's not experiencing this dramatic growth that maybe some other places are that need to go back and review it, pretty much on the dot every 5 years. So, we're a little bit late on that. It's been about 6-7 years. But we thought that since we had adopted all these other plans recently within the last few years, that it'd be a good time to go back and go through it and do some updates. And so I figured that was going to be our next task, was going through the comp plan, and we could go through maybe 1 or 2 chapters each meeting, and a lot of it's just information about new census estimates. So it came out in 2009. We had the big census in 2010 because it's you have the big one every 10 years. We have estimates every year, but the annual census is every 10 years. So we had a lot more information a year later than we adopted this comp plan. So a lot of this is just going through and updating some population estimates. We have as you know, we had a floodplain update in 2013 that removed a large portion of the floodplain from downtown as part of that Paradise Creek daylighting project. And so, and we also had some annexation areas. So we had about maybe 3-4 properties that have been annexed into the city since then. So what that means is all of our maps in the comp plan need to be changed in some fashion in order to reflect the new city limits boundary. So, looking at our Chapter 1, steep slopes and floodplain areas, this would be the portion that would need revising. It used to balloon out and include, at least some properties on the west side of Main Street, and then kind of the Allman, Asbury, Llewellyn neighborhoods. It used to encompass all of those. We reduced to pretty much the stream channel itself, and so you have just a smaller floodplain that kind of just resembles this darker line through here. So we'll need to make some amendments on that. We had Ridgeview Second that was annexed into the city. We had the Logos 30 acres over in this corner that was annexed into the city. We had the Shireman annexation on Robinson Park Road, so we'll have to make those slight adjustments to the city limits boundary on these maps. Looking, in every chapter we have these overarching goals, and then below that we have objectives, and then we have the more precise implementation actions. So, a lot of these implementation actions are the kind of the marching orders about what we really need to do to further the comprehensive plan. Looking at the Chapter 1, one of the implementation actions, number 7, is to actively promote the expansion and maintenance of the city's urban forests by ensuring street trees are planted within all new developments. So these are some things that we're currently working on or we've already completed. So a lot of this will be going through these implementation actions and either crossing them off the list or kind of rewording them to reflect what we've done. One was revised floodplain protection ordinance to increase the protection of the floodplain and prevention of flood damage. So we've, that was a year or two ago, we revised our floodplain ordinance. So we can strike that one off the list. There's another implementation action discussing surface drainage regulations and using bioswales and detention and alternatives to pervious paving surfaces. So these are all things that we had included within our parking lot standards that we're currently working on. So that could be another one where maybe we change the wording a little bit but keep it in there. So we'll be looking at that. Chapter 2 is community character. A lot of this is just more updated information. So WSU, U of I, updated enrollments. housing inventory, housing demand, affordable housing. We've had the analysis to impediments of fair housing document. So we've had that reflect in the affordable housing section. Home occupations, I think at the time we didn't allow them except through maybe a conditional use permit. Now if you work from home on your laptop, or maybe graphic design, architecture, engineering, and you don't have any on-site customers coming to your house, or if it's just you and you're not employing anybody that's coming to your house every day, it's just allowed by right. So you can do that. If you choose to have customer service, customers coming to your house on a daily basis, or if you're employing a couple people that come to your house every day, then you need to go through a conditional use permit in order to do that. So we adopted the home occupation regulations shortly after the comp plan, so we'll need to update that section in order to reflect that. We cover historic districts in the community character section, and so we have Fort Russell that may or may not be finalized by the time that we work through the comp plan update. Hopefully it is, but maybe not. So that'll be one. The boundaries changing in Fort Russell, and so we'll need to reflect that in the comp plan. Urban renewal districts, we need to update Alturas. As you know, it's been closed out, and so we don't have a district anymore in Alturas, so we'll just need to update that information. Entrances and corridors, we had the entryway beautification council goal a few years ago, and developed plans and planting plans and a strategy in order to make our entrances and corridors to the city more beautiful with plantings and walls and infrastructure improvements. So we can certainly update that section. Looking at the implementation actions, we had this implementation action regarding ADUs. So we've accomplished that. We can strike that one off the list. Legacy Crossing, to develop zoning and design criteria. So that happened 2010-ish. So we can strike that one off the list as well. We've accomplished that. This one may still be there. This is more of a wayfinding for pedestrians and motorists in the downtown area. So Public Works had developed those nice historic district signage in the downtown area that's more wayfinding, gives you some interpretive information about the buildings in the district. And so if that was the intention of this implementation action, I thought that they did a really nice job of incorporating those signs in the downtown area. So we could either look at maybe removing that or revising it.
There's also wayfinding signs along many of the bicycle paths.
Yeah.
Throughout the city.
Yeah. And I think there's going to be more too, right?
Yes.
Directing to the U of I and,
yes.
and some. So yeah. So it may be good to wait till we've got those installed and to reassess that implementation action. But we've got our future land use and growth plan, so obviously we'll need to update those annexation areas on the east side of town. We've also had some comp plan amendments. So Harvest Hills subdivision, it was that neighborhood conservation, and we had changed it to another couple designations for neighborhood business and R3 zone. So we'll need to make that change. Other than that, I don't know that we had any other comp plan amendments in that time, but we'll have to, that'll be something we'll need to take a look at. Chapter 3 is our community mobility section. We have just some various sections, local context. We have a section on proposed alternate highway alignments. So getting back to the multimodal transportation plan, when they had kind of done the cost-benefit analysis on a lot of those quadrants, just identified it was more that southwest quadrant was the only alternative highway bypass that may make sense. The southeast, northeast, and the northwest were a whole lot of cost with little benefit to vehicle trips. So we look at revising that to match the multimodal transportation plan. Corridor gateway beautification, that goes back to the council goal that we've not accomplished, but we've got a plan and some funding in place. Public art integration. This section discusses just more of trying to get more public art into new development projects in the downtown area. Arts department's recently adopted the public art master plan, so that we can incorporate that into this chapter. Street trees, we discussed street trees in the community mobility section, so we'll look at updating that with the street tree ordinance moving forward. We need some census numbers that need updating as far as amount of ridership or commuting by bicycle. We've got some of those figures in the bicycle mobility section. Looking at our thoroughfare plan, we still show the ring road concept on there. Looking at what's in the multimodal transportation plan, Les talked about using Palouse River Drive, and some of these that we already have right away that may serve as some type of bypass, albeit they're not going to be 4-lane, 100-foot wide highways that go around the city, but some type of bypass. And so we look at adopting what the consultants had done for the multimodal transportation plan. Looking at our transit routes, this is a little bit outdated. We no longer have the daily east-west from Pullman to Moscow that used to take, we had the Wheatland bus that used to take students from Moscow to Pullman. So we can eliminate that. I think this is we had something similar in the multimodal transportation plan. The majority of the routes stayed fairly the same, but there are some of these, so this is limited service, I think at maybe certain times of the year. So we'll just need to update that with the current route for, and also it's Smart Transit is the name that they're doing business as, so we say Moscow Valley Transit in the bus route information here. So just update some of the terminology and update some of the routes. All this data is from 2007, 2008 time frame for the accident-prone intersections. So we'd have to go back and reassess whether or not those stars stay the same as far as some of the intersections that you have a lot of accidents on. So we'll need to update that. Chapter 4 is our Parks, Rec, and Open Space chapter. And the Parks and Rec Master Plan was developed pretty much in concert with this when we were going through it, and they had updated it, they revised it in 2013. So they had already gone back and we had worked with them with all the mapping that needed to be updated. So it's all pretty similar. So the mapping that's in the Parks and Rec Master Plan is really the same as what we had in the comp plan. So it'll be fairly easy just to take all those maps that community development had done for them and just insert those, just adjusting the city limits boundary. So, this is what we currently have within the comp plan. We had reworked them a little bit to include all the lists of all the parks we have. So they used to just list schools for some reason in the comp plan. So, what and this was, Parks and Rec Commission and Parks and Rec Director really didn't want the schools listed. He wanted all the names of the parks and then all the corresponding numbers. So, that's what we had worked on instead of just, it was really cluttered before. You had all the park names spelled out in the map. And so we went from that to just putting numbers on the different areas and then just having the list here. And so, it's a lot less cluttered, a lot easier to read. And so a lot of that work has already been done, and we can just insert that into the comp plan. Chapter 5 is our public utility service and growth capacity. And a lot of these have been updated. So we had 2011, we had the comprehensive sewer system plan. 2012, we had the comprehensive water system plan. So we have a lot of areas that we identify constraints in the comp plan that may not be so after they've done these water and sewer system plans. And so it'll be fairly easy just to amend the data that we have in the comp plan to the new data that we have with these two large water and sewer system plans. So that'll be helpful that we have those plans in order to go through and
that's what I was
update it.
looking through the file cabinet. I have those, so if you ever want a hard copy, if you don't want to go to the borrow, there's the files.
Okay. Chapter 6, Economic Development, just be updating information on our major employers, U of I, WSU, NRS, Gritman, Co-op. Updating that information, enrollment numbers at U of I and WSU, a lot of these economic indicators, so healthcare, manufacturing, agriculture, information, retail, tourism, and construction. And then some more labor force, unemployment, underemployment, and demographics. So, all of these numbers that we're currently working off of are 2008, 2009 numbers. So, some things have probably changed a
Probably
little
Schweitzer
bit.
Engineering, for
Yeah,
example.
we didn't have.
Yeah.
Looking at the list of major employers, it says in Moscow, but we go ahead and list WSU, but then Schweitzer's not on the list. So. It'd probably be good if we're going to include WSU to include Schweitzer, since they have such a
people
major
live here and work
impact.
there.
Yeah. So, it'll be updating that. We've got this implementation action, and this is really the legacy crossing goal, and to, implement appropriate zoning for the industrial areas adjacent to downtown with mixed use. That integrates it into the University of Idaho campus, and so that was really Legacy Crossing. We've already done the zoning and have the design guidelines, so we can either reword that or strike that one off the list. So, I just wanted to go through and give you an idea. We thought that the updating of the comp plan wasn't going to be that involved. We were just going to have a couple of sections, but when you actually go through the whole document, we have quite a bit of information that we need to update just because it's been 7 years.
So some of it's proactive and some of it's reactive, recording what's actually happened that wasn't necessarily planned to happen, too.
Yeah.
Right? I'm thinking
we've got
for
estimates for population
Right.
and usually the census estimates are not that accurate on a yearly basis, but every 10 years we do the major census, they're pretty accurate. So a lot of this would just be going back and updating that information and the projections but we've had a lot of like you saw, we've had a lot of larger plans that have been adopted that inform the comp plan, and so it'll be good to get this up to date with all that information, because this is kind of our long-term goal of the community, and we're supposed to be chipping away at these implementation actions. So it'd be good to go back and reassess it, and if communities looks like they're going in a different direction, then we need to maybe reassess some of those and change them accordingly. So
some of the big ones though really have been.
Yeah, it's kind of a victory lap in a certain sense, because we've accomplished quite a few, bigger projects, and so.
Mike, one of the things that I was thinking about as you were talking about these implementation actions is, rather than eliminating them because they had been done, updating either the accomplishment or wording it in a way that might also indicate that there could be some further work. I think preserves for the history of the comp plan, when you update it, that it was important enough to be in there, and the action was either completed entirely or there's some additional work to do. So
yeah, I completely agree. I mean, we were looking at a lot of these, like, even the last one there, we could reword it to say that we could eliminate maybe the implement appropriate zoning for the industrial uses, since we've kind of, started to shift those out, but we could certainly encourage redevelopment with water mixed use between downtown and the U of I. So we could certainly continue to have that action of trying to integrate that.
Or even since that there won't be a full comprehensive plan until, 2019, even saying that, or acknowledging that the zoning was completed, and we're going to continue to encourage, so that you've got this recorded history of what's happened during these interim updates.
So too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I figured,
more continuity that way.
Yeah.
To someone that's reading it. Oh.
And then usually if we have these implementation actions, there's usually a narrative section in that chapter that discusses it in a lot more detail. And so it'll be good to go through and actually be able to, talk about what we've done. And, this was Legacy Crossing Overlay District was implemented in 2010, and, Urban Mixed Commercial Zone was designated here in 2010. So, it'll be a good...
you got a lot of work.
Telling the story and not losing the history of the story.
So, I figured what we would do was maybe tackle 1 or 2 chapters each meeting. What we're going to do internally is, over the holidays here, where we've got some downtime, is to do a team effort to tackle going through and trying to get all the updated census information and try to get it updated. So we'll just probably start from chapter 1 and just start bringing you chapters, and we can go through them and review them just one by one and try to knock it out that way.
Right.
Okay, sounds good.
Yeah.
Is that everything on the comprehensive?
Yep.
Okay. The next on the agenda is just a recap of the multimodal, presentation really by Les McDonald. If anybody had any further comments they wanted to make, or what you thought of the whole idea of, et cetera, of having him come speak to us, and whether it should be, I was kind of thinking we should have him come once a year just to give us an update, if nothing else, of maybe not the whole spiel, but unless we have a whole turnover of membership, but just what's happened in terms of the implementation, kind of like that we're talking about here.
And I thought it was great. I really enjoyed it and learned a lot. But as you were just showing the sewer plan and the water plan, and maybe we should be having similar kinds of updates, not just the multimodal, but some of these other comprehensive studies and plans would be really interesting. It was educational.
He did a good job.
Really.
Yeah.
Yeah, I got some positive feedback from people from the audience and members of the public listening too. That
Great.
They were glad. It was very helpful.
We don't put that out to the public maybe as well as a city, maybe as well as we could, so that people had a sense of a certain amount of ownership of that. And this is what's happening in your home.
So, if nothing else, we should ask him to maybe come once a year.
I think it's a great idea.
Yeah. Okay.
So, these are the plans. That's the sewer. This is facilities. There's more in the drawer, but Parks and Rec, their master plan, and then the water system.
Cool.
Okay,
You're
so
welcome to
looking at
borrow.
those, would Les be the same person to come talk
Yeah,
about all
you
these?
would, yeah.
And maybe he could do a shorter synopsis of those two things.
Yeah. Either that or Kevin Lilly, our city engineer.
Oh, true.
You may let him come. But
They're really cool to read through. Even if you don't read the whole thing, just the amount of
Right.
information is great.
and if you're downloading them, they're rather large. I think
I had that trouble with. I had to
sewer
get it
system.
from you. The multimodal
sewer system
one.
for some reason is about twice as thick as the water system. And it's about 80 megs, and
Wow.
So if any of you want to borrow, you can just borrow it.
justice to that.
You just print
So
them.
do you keep them here, or do you
I keep them here. I
Okay.
was also looking for my comp plan because I was going to keep that here too. I keep them in the drawer, so if I ever want to pull them up, and so I can put them back in the drawer. So if you ever want to pull them out, you can.
Well, I forget when the water summit's usually in the fall, but it seems like it would be interesting to somehow tie the water plan in with getting ready for the water summit or something?
Yeah, I think it was a month or two ago.
Yeah, I think it was out of town.
There was a wonderful presentation on water from Stephen. Last Friday when they opened the Smithsonian. Speaking of the water, and it was phenomenal. So, and the more we get those kinds of things, I think
Did anybody go to the water summit this year?
I was out of town. I usually go. Yeah.
The woman who spoke, Maud Barlow, I was at a natural foods conference that's held every year in Hood River, where she spoke, I think, 3 years ago. Oh my gosh, she was just knock your socks off.
Oh wow,
she was great. Yeah,
I think it was in
I
September.
would love to have heard her.
Yeah.
I think we were there while she was here.
Oh
this
year,
year,
I was at a wedding. I remember it was September. So, is there a preference if we start looking at either of these plans, which one you want to do first, and or whether you want to do that and have a presentation about it? I mean, what's the feeling?
Which one would be most impactful of what we're doing on a regular basis, do you think? I don't know that I have a...
To me, water and sewer go together. It's like you got one and you got the other. So I don't know.
Well, the sewer is from 2011 and the water is 2012, so maybe start with the sewer first.
Okay. So give it a couple months and give people a chance to digest it.
Sure.
And
or maybe maybe Les can put together what he thinks are the most important parts of that, and then we could have a shared reading on it.
That would be good. Okay, so.
Yeah, what I thought was beneficial was, there's some maps in there that have areas where there's some constraints going on. So, which usually relates to the capital improvements, where they have replacement of those lines, like the big line that they're replacing on that went across Guywick's Field the last year. So they're replacing a huge sewer line that went out to the wastewater treatment plant, and that was one of the ones identified in the comp plan as well. So that'll go all the way from 6th Street by Patty's Kitchen through. It already had gone through Gormley Field the field was closed this last fall, and then it went over Guywick's Field and over to the wastewater treatment plant. So a lot of those are the ones that are currently over capacity are getting replaced. So
Can you and your staff maybe think about what things apply more to planning and zoning to weed out the part that's like it might be interesting, but it doesn't really impact decisions that.
No, that's why I always thought like the constraint areas were the most interesting and the most important, because obviously there's already a constraint on them, and there's more development that are going to put more of a strain.
So maybe have him specifically address that aspect of each of these, maybe together as a pair, or does it, or keep them separate?
I could see what he recommends.
Okay,
that he do.
rather than going through the whole thing.
Yeah.
So that we get
especially since that's a consideration every time we have a new proposal. It's like, will it impact the infrastructure of water, sewer?
Yeah, and they, part of these is they have a contract with a consulting engineer firm that has a model, and then so they, these larger developments, they'll input whatever's proposed into the model to make sure that the capacity is there. And that's why we try to have them with a memo each time there's some type of development saying that they've run the model and we have enough capacity for this development. So.
Right, okay, yeah, they do say, I remember them saying that more than once.
But it's nice because they have the modeling software where they can input everything and figure it out, and instead of just, well, this is what we think.
So what happens? These are outside consultants, right? And they give a go-ahead and say that there's plenty of capacity, and it turns out there's not. Then what happens? I mean, maybe it never has happened, maybe it never would happen, but if it did, then what? who's responsible for the fact that that was not accurate information?
It would probably lie within the legal agreement that we have with them for the services. So they have they've developed the model, and then it's just based upon how many times they need to run the model every year will depend. So it's maybe they have to run it once, it costs us $5,000 to do it. Run it 3 times, $15,000. So it's just however many times they have to run it basis. So, I'm sure that the agreement we have with them has some type of
it comes back on them if
responsibility.
they're in error. Okay.
I'm just remembering some of the graphs in the water summit that I went to last year, talking about where we kind of hit there. I mean, it's really an unknown. What the real capacity is of our aquifer at this point. So I don't know how any consultant could really credibly say, "Oh, we have plenty of water to get this It's like what puts you over the top, or maybe none of them do." And,
with the adjudication process
right.
coming,
oh brother,
that's something that I think they'll have to research and fully understand if they're going to divvy out water rights to, and research that. So we'll see. I mean,
is it? Well, that's a whole nother topic that we could bring in. That is. But I'm thinking of, adjudication can keep you from collecting water off your roof to irrigate your garden. I mean, it can get really specific, and so.
Well, technically, I think we already have that. I think the state, those are waters of the state, I believe, is in the state statutes is rainwater. But I'm sure they're not worried about your small cistern collecting rainwater off your roof.
Some places they prevent them.
Good,
I
just wanted to add to what Debbie was asking. When the new development over on Orchard was going in, and there were all those questions about the sewer capacity and all that.
Right.
I had wished that people had looked at this because all the models were in there to address it. So people were like, "It's all going to flood," and I'm like, "It's not. It's been designed accordingly. This is not just we're digging a hole and throwing down a pipe. There's a plan. There's been a lot of education around this, and so these things are so useful, especially as a P&Z when people ask you questions. Then you can say, here's the model and here's the information that relates to that particular idea of how it's supposed to tie together.
Sure.
Okay, so it sounds like we can, maybe we have some preliminary discussions with Wes about what is possible out there a few months. Give people a chance to look at it. And then that ties maybe to the next item on the agenda, which is what do we want for future shared readings? And I put to Mike, well, it seems to me that it's really nice when shared readings pair with whatever we have coming down the pike, and it looks like we're also going to be looking at the comprehensive plan and updating it to some degree. So we could have shared readings that surround comprehensive planning.
Okay.
But I don't know what I don't know specifically what those would be yet, but maybe we could do some searches, or if people have other ideas.
That's good.
That journal we used to get was always full of so many good
articles. They discontinued that.
Which journal was that?
It was like a planning commissioner's journal.
But if are they available on like any archive somewhere?
We have a number of them in the office, but I don't think they're digitized.
Okay. I gave all of my hard copies, I think, to Rebecca when she first came on. But if anybody wanted to look, they were really well written, and they covered so much information that there might be something in there about. In fact, I'm sure there was something about.
I can look back through them.
I got Nils Peterson sent me a potential reading about zoning by right, and really looking at the problems with zoning by right, and it got back into form-based codes. And I think we went through this cycle once before, where form-based codes are a lot easier to formulate. They're time-intensive to formulate, but they formulate a lot easier around places like downtown or specific districts than they do community, than it does apply community-wide. It's pretty, and the idea being that, that this article, I read it just to see what it was about, and I sort of screened it, and we could put it out there because it would stimulate an interesting discussion, perhaps. I don't know, but it's short. It doesn't tie exactly into the topics we've just talked about. I don't know. That's another one. It's a possibility, but it's really changing the direction of zoning to go away from traditional land use zoning and not having zoning, but saying the form of the building is more important than what its use is. You know, and that's what form-based is about, basically. And it makes sense in downtown. It doesn't matter. It would make sense in other places where there's a strong form definer, I guess. I don't know. I've done a lot of research in form-based codes, so it's really a cool idea in many ways, but it doesn't always work super easily and across the whole community. Anyway, it's more district-specific, I think. That's my opinion of it, so I'm sort of precluding the
Can we put
possibility.
it out there? I mean, it sounds like it would be interesting to read, even if it wasn't a primary.
It's a short one, and we could have a 20-minute discussion about it, and then we could start to look for. I could send it around, and even it took me 10 minutes to read the article. It's not very long. If you want to do that, I felt that it required some knowledge about what form-based codes really entail to get a realistic understanding of what this article is really asking for. That was my one. But that's a step in understanding what they are. So if you're interested, we could put it up there. I don't know. What do you think, Mike? Did he send it to you too?
He didn't.
No? Oh, okay.
No,
I just got it last week, so when I was traveling, so I read it, but on my iPhone. So.
Yeah, that was great.
Okay. It doesn't take very long, and I was on vacation. So, it was interesting. All right. Well, before we adjourn, this is Deb has been with us on planning and zoning for 10 years now. Is that correct? And she's decided not to renew her term, and we're going to miss her.
Yeah.
And besides the mayor's cookies, which he gave to everybody just as part of the commission, we'd also like to give you.
Oh,
this.
thank you. That's really. I'm going to miss
And
everybody.
thank you for your service, and maybe you'll change your mind when you find out all the exciting topics we're going to.
I think I'm tired and need a break. Signage.
Oh, interpretive signage.
Well, thank you so much. That's really nice. I'll read them when I get home.
Come
I will.
visit us.
Huh? Oh, yeah. Actually, the thing that led to even putting an application in, other than the fact that Nancy asked me if I was interested, was that starting when, about 2002, we went to every city council meeting.
Wow.
And a good many of Public Works and Finance. And just sort of snowballed from there. So, yeah. Anybody that's listening, it's really a cool thing to do.
Yeah, it is.
I agree.
And cool just in the sense that this is our home. So why wouldn't you want to participate?
Yeah.
Right?
Well, we appreciate your
Yeah, thank you.
expertise that
Thank
you
you.
brought
Yes.
and time, because it's a time commitment compared to other commissions. I think it's one of the more intensive ones. That,
I have learned a
Yeah.
tremendous
Yeah.
amount and made some nice friends. Thank you.
Well, thank you, and we're sorry that you're not coming back, but think about taking a vacation for a year or two from it and enjoying other
you
things
never
and
know.
then come back on. Sure. Yeah. Well, anything else, or should we say goodnight? Okay.
Sounds like a plan.
Good night.
Enjoy a cookie from the mayor.